Hey there, bonsai lovers. Welcome back to yet another episode of the Bonsai Stuff podcast. Your host for this evening, or this morning, or your midday, whatever time of the day it is you listen to this podcast, is me, Scott Martin from Bonsai Matsu. And as always, thank you very much for listening in. It's truly appreciated. And I've been very busy lately. Anyone who's seen any of my social media posts will know that I have transitioned from working on pines to repotting. It's full on. It's frantic paced. There's a lot to do, a lot been done already, but there's still a lot more to do. And I want to talk a little bit about repotting, obviously, as I forewarned in previous podcasts. Talk about a few things that I've come across, just as a tip, a reminder for anyone that is looking to repot themselves. Maybe some things that might help you. I want to talk about wiring and shaping your trees too. Just a little refresher, reminder on a few key things that I focus in on with that. And also, I went to a demonstration the other day, which I'll talk a little bit about, which was fantastic, put on by one of the bonsai clubs here in Victoria, Bonsai Society of Victoria, and it was awesome. It's really, really good. And there was just talk about a facet of bonsai etiquette that I want to bring up as well. So anyway, strap yourselves in, get yourself a nice warm cup of tea, and let's get into it, eh? So repotting time for me is honestly one of the best times of the year. It's very busy. It is. There's no two ways about it. I can't get around the fact that every year there seems to be more trees than what there was the year before. But it's one of those times where I get to do a lot of foundation work. And while the results, you think taking a tree out of a pot and hacking away at some roots and putting it back in a pot really doesn't sound that exciting, especially when a lot of my trees go back into their existing pots. I don't have a strong desire for a lot of the trees to get into new pots because I'm really happy with what they're in now. It's taken a lot of years to get them to where they are now, and the vast majority, almost all of them, go back into those pots because those pots are really nice. There's a few that need to change over, but not a lot. So when I do the repotting work, it's actually really nice. Like I'm so many years into it now that I know what to expect when I take the tree out of the pot, but it's still really nice when you get a tree, and it doesn't matter if it's in a pot that's, a centimetre, 2 centimetres deep, or it's, a massive pot, and you look at that root structure, that root system that's formed, all those fine, delicate roots in there that have just filled the pot to capacity. It's been, 2, 3, 4 years, whatever it is between the repotting cycles. It's really positive to see that and get that reassurance that what you're doing with the mix you've chosen, with the care you've given, with the fertilising, with all that stuff, that it's worked. And the tree's in a really strong place. So when I come across something that's unusual, that's out of the ordinary, I like to hone in on it. And one of the things that I had the other day was there was a root over rock, one of mine, that originally had been put into the ground to grow over this rock. And I was working my way through the root ball, and I've had this thing for a long time, a lot of years. Been through a lot of repotting cycles, and it's been I feel a bit remiss with what I'd been doing with the care, because underneath the rock the root system was great, looked really, really good. But then I got to this one section where it was particularly muddy. It's been very cold, and it was just particularly muddy in this section, and it just looked a bit gluggy. And I went, okay, so what's that? So I start digging away. Anyway, start digging. Next thing I get the chopstick out, and I'm starting to work in a little bit closer to the root ball, into the rock, where the roots had sort of wrapped around the rock, and there was this old soil section. And old soil is useless. Like that dirt from the ground or any non-grit type soil I deem as useless, because when you start taking that soil away, you find that cavity has developed where absolutely no roots have grown in that section of the root ball. So I started digging, and it wasn't, like I said, the tree's very healthy. There was a really strong root system on this tree. There's no setback on it whatsoever. But I look at it's prime real estate. Anything in the bonsai pot is considered to me to be prime real estate for the tree to develop its root system. And very different to a tree in the ground, which can just keep growing and get what it needs from anywhere. In a pot, it's there's limited space, and if I choose to get a really nice tight pot that makes the tree look spectacular because it's it's not floating in this massive pot, it's in something that's really small. When I come across these sections of this old soil, I get I was a bit disappointed with myself, thinking, you've repotted this thing. How many times now? Like every 2, 3, 4 years, it's been, 5 repots, 10, over 10 years, something like that, or more. Why couldn't you have come across this before? And sometimes it's nice to get little reminders. Or I like to get reminders like this to say, hey, just slow down a little bit. Don't be in a rush to try and finish this thing and get through your repotting and tick a box and say, yeah, done. I've got repotting done. It's actually, you've got to do it properly. So take the extra time. I found by removing all this old soil, I had a cavity in there. I'm making a size with my fingers, about the size of, I don't know, a 50-cent coin. It's, a couple of centimetres, 2-3 centimetres across, and sort of about that circle as well, like the size of a pool ball, billiard ball, something like that. A bit smaller than that, to be honest. Wasn't that dramatic. But anyway, by taking out this old soil where absolutely no roots had grown and it had that real rotten stink in it, clearing out some of the dead roots that were around that area, got to repot the tree, fill it with the soil mix that I use, the pumice-based mix, and that gives the tree that extra real estate to grow its root system in, and that to me is really important. In making sure that I've got everything done to the best of my ability, to give the tree the best chance to be what it can possibly be. And after coming across that, now I'm searching even harder for this old soil. I haven't come across it again in any others, and it's really an anomaly to have had it in my collection. But it's just a reminder that when you start repotting, if you come across old soil like that, you've got to be careful with it. You don't just go, if it's a collected tree, or if it's let's say it's a pine and it's got a lot of old clay around it or something like that, then there's a process to it, a procedure where you take out sections of it or quadrants, and you do it bit by bit over years and years and years. You don't just remove the whole lot and bare root the tree and kill it. I'm not saying do that, but for me, coming across this tiny little section, being able to remove that soil out of there, remove the rotten roots that were in that area as well, I've done my job. I've ticked the box to say that's good. That's what I wanted to do. And while we're talking about soil mix too, very contentious issue. Everyone has their own mix. Mine is very, very simple, very basic. It's got to be, consistent, reliable, repeatable, all the things that I've talked about over and over and over, that my expectations with whatever I do with my trees has to be from year to year to year, has to be the same, has to be really reliable, and predictable. I've got to be able to predict what the tree is going to be able to do in a certain period of time in order for my plans to come to fruition. And my mix is really simple, equal portions, pumice, scoria or lava rock, wherever you're from, and pine nuggets. And they're aged pine nuggets. They're only 6 mil, so it's all nice and small. It's not pine bark like you get for your garden beds or anything like that. It's pine nuggets, so you've got to look them up. In equal portions, I've used it forever and a day now for a very long period of time, and the results I get are fantastic. And the same size particles get used in all of my trees, whether they're in tiny pots or whether they're in enormous pots. I don't scale down the size of my mix for the size of the pot, because a really simple, easy approach is that tree doesn't know whether it's growing in a small pot or it's growing in a large pot or it's growing in the ground. It just needs to form roots, and the root system forms when I use the particle size that I use, and it gives the tree what it needs to be able to transpire, to take up nutrients and water, and to survive and thrive in pot culture. So I don't look to change the particle size based on the pot, because the tree doesn't grow different roots because it's in a smaller pot. Really simple. Not trying to dumb it down too much, but it's just one thing. I make up a batch of this stuff. Customers take it from me, man. I fill up big bins of these things and just tear through it. All my trees, every single one, whether it's a pine, a maple, a Australian native, whatever it is, it goes into this exact same mix. and I've got that predictability and reliability and consistency of results that I can produce. But what I want to talk about is this concern over water retention in your soil mix, and I promise I won't talk about this in future podcasts because I know I can bang on about it a little bit, but you've got a conundrum. You've got to focus on water retention in your mix or root growth. Okay, because if you retain too much water, then your root growth isn't going to be to a high enough standard, in my opinion, for your bonsai to get to that next level. And there's a fear of changing your mix to one of these grittier type mixes, because I've heard it said a lot of times, I just want to get through a summer and see how I go, and then I'll come back to you. But the basic principle or basic approach that I use is if I can get a really strong root system that's going to be able to assist the tree, or the tree can then do its job. The engine of the tree can do its job. It can take up the water and nutrients and get through the tree's vascular system to its extremities, to its foliage, and keep water there at any time of the year, no matter how hot it is. Then the tree won't burn. If there's water inside the foliage, then it won't burn. It's only when that water flow isn't adequate enough that you'll get issues with foliage burn in the heart of summer. There's a few other things you've got to do with exposing your trees to heat and whatever. So I'm just focusing in on the root system at the moment for the repotting process. And the approach that I use is that I always favour root growth as my number one priority when I'm repotting over absolutely everything else. And I allow the water retention side of things to be a secondary. The particles have certain water retention facility with their surface mass that they've got, the pitted surface and all that sort of stuff, and the pine nuggets soak it up like a sponge. But it's really about encouraging that strong root growth, so when I do water, the tree can take it up straight away. I don't want them to sit in water. I don't want those roots to stay wet. Staying wet isn't my focus. That's when rot's going to happen, and you're going to start suffocating those new potential roots, and they're not going to grow like you expect them to. So I focus on root growth as opposed to water retention is positive, and it's going to give you a real quantum leap forward in how you care for your trees. Because I know I've been there, I've done it. I've gone from a water retention approach to a root growth approach, and seeing the results of it are incredible. And once you've seen it once, you're never going to go back. Wiring your bonsai for styling purposes, it takes time. It's a skill in itself. It's something you have to practice. You have to build up your repertoire, and you get better at it over time. If you apply yourself, like anything, like playing tennis or football or whatever, anything that you do, baking cake, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. Mowing your lawns, it doesn't matter what when you do these things. And you put everything you've got into it, you get better, and you get faster, and you get more accurate with what you do. And one of the things that I come across a lot, and the best advice that I can give you when you're wiring is, it's hard, and it does take time, and it takes effort, and there's a lot of ways you can try and avoid wiring your bonsai. But pretty much due to the nature of how the tree is going to grow, in the vast majority of circumstances, they're going to bunch together, which means that inner part of the tree is not going to do very well because it's not going to get enough sunlight, and they're just going to look like a shrub, a garden shrub that you're going to get from the nursery or whatever else. You want them to look like bonsai, whatever that image is that when you say the word bonsai, an image should flash into your brain of what you think a bonsai should look like. Not what I think, not what the person beside you thinks, it's what you think. And when you're working on trees and you're coming up with a design concept or an approach that you want, then wiring is one of these techniques that is very good at helping you achieve that style, but also improving the strength of the tree because you can open up the foliage, you can let sunlight and air into those inner areas, you can get the back budding, the bud conveyor can start up and keep rolling for the rest of the tree's life. So wiring is essential. You'll find that as time goes on, as once the tree structure is set, the amount of wiring does back off. So if you're at the start of your bonsai journey, it's going to feel like you're wiring everything. As you get further down the track and as your trees mature and the plan starts to come to fruition and you start achieving your design objectives, you'll notice that unless there's a key structural change that you want to make with the tree, pretty much you're going to be doing a little bit of light wiring on the tips of your branches, because the key primary branches should be set in place. Might be a few guy wires here and there just to bring things down or settle them where you want them or pull them up or whatever it might be. But the initial wiring that you're doing or the styling wiring that you do, the best advice I can give you is go slightly heavier on the wire than what you think it needs. Okay, so there's the 10 centimeter test where you take 10 centimeters of wire, you push it against the branch. This is aluminium wire, not copper, but if you take 10 centimeters of wire and push it against the branch and the branch flexes and the wire stays straight, then the wire is strong enough to do the job. If you push it against the branch and the wire bends in your hand but the branch doesn't move, then the wire's too thin to do the job. So let's say you get a branch, you get 3 mil wire out and you push it against that branch and that branch flexes, right? It moves really, really nicely, really easily. So then you get 2.5 mil, you push it against the branch and it doesn't flex quite so well. Okay, so 3 mil is the gauge to do it. My advice to you is if 3 mil can do it, think about going to 3.5 or to 4 mil. Okay, what the most disappointing thing that you can come across is when you wire a tree, you pick the wires, you put them all on there, and then all of a sudden you get to the point where you start shaping and styling and moving and positioning branches, and you move the branch and it bounces back, or it doesn't quite go exactly as far as what you need, and it'll bend a little bit, maybe further down towards the tip of the branch where it's a bit thinner and a bit weaker. That part's fine, but back towards the trunk where you need to make the first movement on the branch, doesn't do it, doesn't cut it. So your options are put another wire on there, so you've got to wire twice. It's hard enough and it's painful enough sometimes doing it the first time, let alone to go and have to do it a second time. Or the other option you've got is to start using guy wires. And if you're going to be doing guy wires on a branch, why the hell did you wire it in the first place? You could have just wired the tips and grabbed the guy wire and then bent it down. And guy wires are awesome. I use them every day. Brilliant. But they've got limited application because they'll only bend from the point really where the guy wire comes into contact. So if you want to bend a branch closer to the trunk, then it gets very difficult with a guy wire to do it. And you'll end up with a sort of a looping branch. It'll go up and down gently like a loop, as opposed to being a more accurate, more rigid or sharper bend on that branch. So you don't want to get to the part where you're styling your tree, start moving your branches around, and then realize that you've stuffed up, because getting your hands into the tree, putting wire on there, you'll know that you've broken off needles, you've broken branches, you've done a bit of carnage in the tree itself. Inevitable. No matter how good you are, that will happen on the odd occasion. Less and less as you get better and better at it, but it's still like you've still got to get your hands in there and move things around and use your pliers to bend. So you're sort of intrusive on the tree, and it's a stress. So by choosing a slightly heavier wire, especially for those primary branches, then that's where you're going to get bang for your buck. The lighter branches, as you come towards the tip, the secondary, the tertiary branches, yeah, sure, don't go overboard with those because you'll start snapping them. But really, to get those branches bent, and if you've got a long branch that you need to, for want of a better word, snake and bring back in and compress that branch, then you really need to make sure that wire is going to be heavy, because a lighter wire, yeah, sure, you might get a bit of an angle adjustment on it, but you won't get that compression where it's going to hold. So doing it once, doing it slightly heavier, doing it to the best of your abilities, it's going to do far less damage to the tree, be far more satisfying, and you're going to achieve the objective that you want with styling and shaping the tree. So Don't use light wire. Light wire's easy. Light wire's great. It goes on, flows on really fast. You can feel like you're a pro and smash it out in no time at all. But that positioning, that movement of the branches, yeah. And like I said, I put on really. I step the wire up quite significantly for my primary branches. And when I'm wiring primary branches, I don't always look to do a lot of secondary wiring or tertiary wiring, like that fine detail stuff. I'd rather go, I'm focusing on primary branches, step it up, make it really heavy, get in there, do the big bends on the branches, let them set in place over however long it's going to take for those branches to set. And then when I've got that, then I can focus on the next stage. And that's always how I build it into my plan for whatever tree it is in front of me. It's always, okay, so got the trunk, yeah, tick that off, right, primary branches. Let's just focus on that. Let's get that really heavy wire on there. Let's set them in place. Let's make sure that I never have to come back and bloody wire these branches ever again, because, it's stressful. It's hard on the tree. It's hard on my hands. You're using heavy wire. It can be, cost can add up on it as well. So I try and make sure that I do it once, set and forget, leave it, make sure that, depending on the species, and I say this quite cautiously, let the wire cut in a little bit as well to make sure that I've got that scarring, that new tissue growth to hold the branch in place, because I don't want to, wire heavy, bend the branches, get them in place, then cut the wire off too soon and the branches pop back up and, voila, I'm back to step one. I've got to get back in there and rewire that part of the tree again. So I always leave it, that's a little bit too long, get a bit of scarring, come back in. Once that's done, I don't have to worry about it. Then I can start working on my secondary branches, get them all in place, and by the time it gets to that fine, detailed wiring, a lot of the time I'm clip and grow. I'm pruning to get shape and get a more natural feel. Wire the primaries, most times wire the secondaries, and then that's about it for me. I'll start pruning and like I said, guide wires to help hold the branches in place rather than getting that ski jump at the end. But yeah, don't waste your time wiring light. It's not going to give you exactly what you want. So I was fortunate the other day to go to a demonstration. There's a Japanese master out here, Hirotoshi Sato, thanks to the Bonsai Society of Victoria. Got to go along and have a look at him doing demonstrations, and there was a question. Someone from the audience threw out a question on the tree. How old's the tree? Really common. One of the most common questions you get asked. You put a photo up of a tree, first thing you get asked is how old is it? And you try and do your best, but often these things are, planted way before your time, or they've passed through hands, and you try and get as best a guess as you possibly can based on factors of the tree. But what I want to talk about was the interpreter talked about it afterwards. So it wasn't Hiro who was the person who was doing the demonstration. It wasn't his words, but the interpreter turned around and said, we teach people bonsai etiquette. And bonsai etiquette is you never ask the age of a tree. And I went, made my ears prick up. I never heard that as part of bonsai etiquette. But his words were, you don't ask about the age of the tree because it's not important. It doesn't matter. It's the perceived age of the tree that's important in bonsai. And I went, and that was like a light bulb moment for me, because it's so true. And I believe that as well. Like we work with bonsai to give a perception. I'm not trying to mislead anybody, but we're giving a perception of age. And you can work on a tree that's still very young as a bonsai and make it look old. The way you shape the branches, the way you position pads, the way you work on deadwood on a trunk or put it into a pot, or the way you position it. And you can give something that real perception of age. We can't rush things like bark. Bark to me is the one telltale about the exact age of a tree, because it takes time to grow. And young trees just don't have bark. They just, some species, they do grow bark at different rates and all that sort of stuff. But pretty much the way that we build the tree, the way that we design it, we can make something look a lot older. And likewise, you can have a very young bonsai that's a very old tree. I've got one in my collection that's a an olive that was dug out of a house not far from here. It was just a garden tree. Tree is 100 years old, I'm told, give or take. I haven't counted it myself, but I'm told it's it's around the 100-year mark. But it's only been worked on as a bonsai for probably 6 or 7 years. So it's very young as a bonsai, but it's very old as a tree. And that's the part. That's the quandary that we deal with, I suppose, in bonsai, because we're chasing age. We love to see the oldest tree that's ever that's alive as a bonsai. That's an ideal. Oh, look at this tree; it's 1,000 years old. But you look at it, and I'm not saying I'm just using this as an example. I'm not saying it actually doesn't look like that. But you might look at let's say a 100-year-old tree and go, wow, that's not what I expected. It looks like it's probably 20 years old, but it doesn't look like it's 100 years old. And I've had trees come in the workshop for me where someone says to me, this stick in the pot, what do you think? How old? And you look at it and go, well, I think 5 years, 10 years. And it's like, I've had that thing 35 years. It just grows, dies. So it's in this holding pattern because it can't have what it needs to get to the next level. But it's a very old, very small tree, like a young whip. And it's true, like, I don't know whether I would say it's rude to ask the age of a bonsai, but it's definitely one of those things that I'd want to talk about, not from the point that I think it's part of bonsai etiquette that we don't talk about it, but it's just definitely something that we should consider when you're working on your trees and you're dating things in your own head. It doesn't matter the age of the tree; it's the perception of age that makes the difference. And I just want to reiterate that I don't think it's rude for someone to ask me the age of the tree. I really don't. I think my approach to it would be, how long has that been in training for? How long has it taken for it to get from a start point to that point? That's really important. I think that's setting expectations for people to know that it's not an overnight thing for a tree like that. Yeah, sure. Initial wiring, styling, yep, that part looks good. But to get that maturity in a bonsai, it's a good 5 years to let things develop naturally, to take you to the point where you are thinking that it's a 100-year-old tree, or that it's really well developed or really well refined. And that's with a pine, but it's something with finer, more delicate branching, like a deciduous, where you see the foliage during that winter period only. The rest of the time it's got big leaf on it. That's when you look at a tree and you can tell the age of a deciduous tree, because one branch turns into two only sort of once a year on average. There's things you can do to speed it up, but really on average it's once a year getting that twigging. So if you look at a tree that's got twigging all over this thing and it's as dense as you can possibly imagine, then you can sort of count the years backwards and go, wow, that's a really old tree. Whereas you see something with its foliage on, it could be a really young tree, but the leaves take up the space like a bunch of needles do, I suppose, on a pine tree, or a juniper foliage, the massive of cloud. Anyway, so I just thought it was really interesting. I wanted to talk about bonsai etiquette from the point of view that I don't think it's necessarily rude, but it's just a really nice focus to not focus on the actual age of the tree, but the perceived age of the tree, which is the important part. Now, when it comes to acquisition of new trees, I know very few of us need any encouragement at all, but if you are where I am, if you're in the southern hemisphere and it's repotting time, or near enough to repotting time, or close to repotting time, let me tell you, now's a really good time to buy trees. It's probably my preferred time of the whole year to acquire stock or a bonsai, because I can take it and the first thing I can do with it is repot it. And I can get it into my mix and I can get that predictability and reliability of results, as opposed to if you wait a few months, you're going towards summer, the heat, you acquire a tree or buy a tree then or get a tree then. It can be really difficult because you just don't know. There's a massive unknown of how to manage and deal with that tree and look after it, because you've got something which you've had nothing to do with, and you get it probably going into one of the most stressful times of the year. That's really tough. And if I do happen to get trees during that time, then I'll just make sure that I keep them in check and maintain them as well as I probably can and protect them until I can get to this time of the year, until I can repot. So if you are going to be looking at buying a tree, now's a great time. Seriously, get it, repot it first up as soon as you get it. No matter if the person you buy it off says, I just repotted that last year or whatever, don't worry about it. Just my advice would be to get it and repot it into whatever it is that you do with your trees, so you know how to look after them and how to maintain them. But I want to also encourage you to spice it up a little bit. Spice up your bonsai life, right? Choose a difficult tree. Choose something that requires a lot of planning, a lot of preparation, a long-term approach, one which is going to really test your skill level and encourage you to develop your skills and get better at things. And maybe, sit there and stare at it for a long time. Don't, get something which, maybe has to be tilted or changed angle or a big bend, or there's got to be something with it. But just, I encourage you. They're the challenging ones are the most rewarding ones when you look at them somewhere down the track and go, wow, do you remember where that thing started? Whereas if you get a tree, just need to wire a few branches down, nice, beautiful, very satisfying. But it's not going to really push your skill level to that next level where you need to rebuild something or develop it completely and come out with a beautiful butterfly at the other end of it, So I really do encourage you to spice it up and like I said, perfect timing right now. Secondly, be challenged with something. Don't go for the run of the mill. Definitely get run of the mill, but just maybe get one or two little, difficult ones. There's difficult children that you have to really put a lot of work into, and when they come out the other end, you can be super proud of what you've done. Anyway, thanks for listening. Thanks for sticking around. We're at the end of yet another podcast. This is episode 26 for 2024. So plowing through them, which is great because just the more I do these things, the more I feel like I've got to spill my guts and talk about bonsai with you all. So thank you for your patronage. You're all legends. I love you very much, and I appreciate you when you get in touch. And I'm really excited to help in any way that I possibly can to make your bonsai journey the best it can possibly be. See you next week. As always, happy bonsai.